What kind of father sells your childhood memories and then calls it a favor? That wasn't love, that was leverage, and I was too broken to see it. Narration begins. Carla Monroe never thought she'd cry over a box of old photo albums. Until they weren't hers anymore. It started in the summer of '98, fresh out of a nasty divorce. Carla packed up what was left of her life into cardboard boxes, baby shoes, wedding china, faded sketchbooks, and loaded it all into a beat-up U-Haul. She had her 6-year-old son in one hand, a court order in the other, and nowhere to go. Her father, Richard Monroe, silver-haired, self-made, emotionally unavailable, made her an offer. "Store your stuff in my garage, just till you get back on your feet." It sounded kind, it felt like grace. But Carla didn't know yet. His generosity came with strings and padlocks. She moved into a cramped rental in Savannah. Weeks passed, then months. Every time she asked about her things, Richard had an excuse. Garage is a mess. Truck's in the shop. Let's talk later. Later never came. Then one morning, 2 years later, Carla was scrolling through Craigslist, and there it was, a familiar oil painting. Her mother's painting, listed for $175. Frame cracked, signature smudged, but hers, no doubt. The listing name, Richmond Sell It. She stared at the screen, her breath caught. That was the moment she realized. He never stored her memories. He sold them. When she called him, shaking, Richard didn't deny it. He laughed. "You owed me, Carla. Those boxes were collateral. You forget who paid your rent. Collateral." She remembered the loan, $2,000. Desperate times. But there was no contract. No agreement. No mention that her entire past, her son's baby blanket, her mother's pearls, her journals, could be auctioned off like junk. But the worst part wasn't the stuff, it was the betrayal. He knew how much those things meant, and he sold them anyway, not for survival but for control. Carla filed a civil claim the next day, but as she stood in that courtroom, facing the man who raised her, all she could think was, how do you prove emotional theft? End scene with a cliffhanger beat. The judge asked for proof. Carla reached into her bag and pulled out the appraised value list her father once demanded. The same one he claimed never existed. "He said he was protecting me, but why did I find my mother's will stuffed inside a broken lampshade?" Narration begins. The courtroom smelled like coffee and cold metal chairs. Carla had thought the worst was over. She was wrong. As her lawyer presented the itemized list of lost possessions, Richard sat smugly, arms folded. He barely looked at her. Just smirked, like this was a poker game, and he was already holding the winning hand. But Carla had something he didn't expect, the boxes. Well, what was left of them? Weeks before the hearing, she'd tracked down one of the estate sale buyers through a Craigslist post. A middle-aged woman from Macon who bought a bundle of vintage family keepsakes for $25. What Carla found inside shook her to the core. Amid dusty books and chipped figurines, she discovered a folded legal envelope, taped behind a framed photo. Inside, a handwritten letter from her mother, addressed to no one. Dated night, it read, "If anything happens to me, make sure Carla knows the truth about the lake house." Carla never even knew her mother owned a lake house. That night she drove back to her rental, dug through old files, and found an old manila folder labeled Settlement 19. Richard was never supposed to touch a dime, so why did he sell everything as if it belonged to him? The next morning, Carla went to the courthouse and pulled the probate records. Richard had never submitted the will. He'd claimed there wasn't one. The emotional betrayal ran even deeper than she'd imagined. This wasn't just about furniture or forgotten memories. This was about erased history, a manipulation that stretched back decades. He hadn't stored her belongings. He'd buried her legacy. In court, Carla's voice cracked as she explained what she'd found. Her lawyer handed the judge the letter. Richard's attorney objected. Hearsay, irrelevant. The judge paused, reading silently. Then he looked at Richard and asked, Did you know about this letter?" Richard blinked. Twice. Then gave the worst answer imaginable. "What letter? I didn't come here to win a case. I came here to face the man who took everything, and still acted like I owed him thanks." Narration begins. The courtroom was silent as the judge shuffled through the papers. Carla sat frozen, not from fear but from finally, reaching the end of this nightmare. Richard Monroe had built his life on control. He controlled the narrative, the money, the stories, even the silence between them. But today, he couldn't control the truth. The judge leaned forward. Based on the evidence provided, the handwritten letter, the unsent will, and testimony from both parties. I find in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Carla Monroe. A small gasp from the back of the courtroom. Carla didn't smile. She didn't even blink, because this wasn't a victory. Not really. She would be compensated for the lost items. A few $1,000s. A formal reprimand. But no court could replace what was truly lost. Her mother's last words. The trust she once had in her father, or the comfort of old things that once made a house feel like a home. Richard didn't speak. He just stood there, stone-faced, as if none of it mattered, as if he was the victim. Carla walked past him on her way out of the courtroom. No eye contact, no words, but in her chest something shifted. Not peace, not yet, but power. Outside, under a gray savanna sky, Carla opened her trunk and took out the box she'd recovered, the one with her mother's letter. She unfolded it once more. This time she read the final line aloud. Protect what matters, even when no one believes you. For years Carla had believed she was the one who owed silence, owed gratitude, owed loyalty, even to a man who'd sold her memories for spare change. But not anymore. She wasn't broken. She was rebuilt. Final beat, closing visual. As Carla walked to her car, she passed a woman dragging 2 boxes from a pawn shop. She paused, then turned back, offering help. A small act maybe, but this time she knew what she was giving, and what she'd never let anyone take again.